And with that, we welcome you in to another episode of the Marriage Talk podcast. It's great to have you with us. Thank you for subscribing and hopefully sharing the link with other couples in your life that could benefit from some insights like we bring every week here. My name is Bill Hobson. I'm joined by Jay and Laura LaFoon, and you can find out all the information about where they'll be and what events they're hosting and what coaching they offer by going to jayandlaura.com. Last week, we helped our audience launch into the new year of 2024 with some specific investment in your marriage ideas. This week, we're diving into some of the most important words that we can ever speak to each other, right? It's the word that I'm trying to remember when the first time was that I heard one of my children say back to me in defiance the word no, because the two words we're focusing on today are yes and no. Um, it'll come to me at some point, but obviously it happens. We all have that in
It's
us,
shocking, but it does.
and it doesn't just go away when we get a little bit older. So why are yes and no so high on the list of important words?
We actually consider them the two most important words in the world, because every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something. And every time you say no to something, you're also saying yes to something. And so what yes and no really defines are your priorities. When you say yes to things and no to things, it's defining your priorities. And in marriage, what happened for us, we had gotten about 8 years into our marriage. Laura was saying yes.
It was 10.
It was 10, whatever. Laura was saying yes to everything. She was on 16 different committees. She had 8 different volunteer jobs at the church, helping in the classroom. Yes, 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 yes. And conversely, I said no to everything. I mean, it was like, no way, no way, no way, no way. And so we had this dichotomy in our marriage where she was involved in way too much and I was not involved in enough. And so we really had we put ourselves through a process of determining what it was we were going to say yes to and what it was we were going to say no to, because we had drifted apart in our marriage quite significantly because she was saying yes to everything and I was saying no to everything. And so we were a cliche, like two ships in the night. We just never connected, never said yes to stuff for us.
We just weren't on the same page about anything.
Why do you think that was? Why did you just have your own proclivities you brought into the marriage where Laura was always saying yes and Jay, were you always saying no? Or was this a new discovery? Like you just wanted to not do anything and she wanted to do everything?
I think it happened gradually because I am an extrovert and Jay's an introvert. And I know for people who know Jay find that hard to believe that he's an introvert, but he does get his energy from being alone. I get my energy from being with people. And so when any opportunity would come around for me to volunteer in this, that, or the other thing, I was like, yeah, I'll do that because I wanted to be with people. I at that point did not want to sit at home every night like he did. And I didn't understand that was where he got his energy from, that he needed that time because we were in full-time ministry. And so when he's out with doing ministry all day long, working with kids, whatever, then when he came home at night, he didn't want to do any more. I was with kids all day doing ministry, so I wanted to be with adults at night. And so I would say yes to things that I could be involved with my friends, with other moms. And so I think it just kind of happened gradually without us even really realizing it had happened. And then we look at a week and we're never home. First of all, we're in full-time ministry, so we're never home. And even though we were in ministry together, it was very different. He was in an administrative role. I was in a hands-on ministry role in the same ministry, but I was working with the kids 24/7. He was an administrator and working with kids. And so we had kind of, our jobs kind of coalesced, but not really. And then when I was saying yes to doing everything, being on all these committees, doing and being with my friends, blah, 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 I was gone all the time and he was home all the time. And so it just kind of.
And what happened was, what was very interesting about it was Laura would go to her committee meeting on Tuesday night and be out till 10 o'clock and come home energized and enthused because she had been with people. And I had sat at home and read or watched TV or done something, solitary. And so I was energized. And we didn't realize that even though we were being energized by this, it was killing our marriage because we weren't spending time together. And so there's so much good.
And yeah, they were
that,
all good
right.
things.
There's so much good, but you can't sacrifice the great for the good. And so as a couple, you've got to really define what is our yes going to be? What is our no going to be? And so one of the best ways to determine that is to start talking about your values as a couple. You were attracted to each other because you shared some of the same beliefs and convictions. You shared some of the same outlook on the future, some of the same ideas about raising a family. So talk about those things that you value. And it's funny because we talk to people about valuing 3 different things: the people that you value, the ideas that you value, and the things that you value. And now everyone that grew up like me in a Baptist church is just cringing when I said you're not supposed to value things. You value people, but not things. Things are not. No, I'm talking about, like, Laura values our home.
Things are important to you.
Because our home is important to her. It represents so much more than a structure. I value my golf clubs, not because I'm a golfaholic, but because I find rejuvenation when I golf. So that's a very valuable thing to me. And so I want to play well, and everyone knows you have to spend money on golf clubs to play well. But bottom line is, talk about those people that are important to you, those ideas like honesty, integrity, hard work, and then the things that are important to you. And you're going to come back to finding out that, oh my goodness, we're on the same page when it comes to just about everything. And it's really wild when we get couples to do that, how they see how much they really do value the same thing.
So in the introvert extrovert pairing, where one is always yes and one is I just want to be at home in my pajama pants, and knowing that that's a part really of who you are and how you were wired, how do you keep from that becoming something that's maybe even pulling you further apart? Because as you said, Laura was finding her fulfillment and her energy from groups and events and commitments. Jay was finding his from just being able to be at home and in solitude after a day of being around people. I mean, I get peopled out really quick. So knowing that that's kind of how we're wired, how do we make sure that the yes and no part of that doesn't rob from who we are, but still allows us as a couple to be strong?
We had to really find a balance. Yes, I get energized from being around people, but I don't need to be gone from my house 7 nights a week.
Mm.
And at the same time, while Jay gets energy from being alone, he doesn't need to be alone 7 nights a week. So we really had to find a balance where we could, here's what's fair. And that's where these values talking about the values and the people and the ideas and the things that are important to you. Ministry was hugely important to us. That's why I feel like the Lord brought us together, was because we both knew that we wanted to do ministry with our spouse. We wanted to be in full-time ministry together, not Laura full-time ministry, Jay full-time ministry. We wanted to do ministry together. And so I had to understand that then if he's going to be doing stuff with people all day, every day, then there has to be time for him to re-energize. It doesn't mean it needs to be an 8-hour energizing. And in the same time, he needed to understand that, yes, I'm with kids all day and I'm with adults that I work with, but they're not my friends. I need to be with my friends in order to get energy too. And so that we had to come to a balance of what's fair, what's the expectation. Is it fair to say, can I go to dinner with my friends, once every 2 weeks? Yeah, that's fair. Is it fair to say, I just need an evening at home every couple nights during the week? Yeah, that's fair. And I'm not going to go out on those nights when he's at home. I'm going to be at home with him. And we found things that we can do together that give me the social and also give him some energy.
Like what? Oh, like pickleball, because it's athletic. Yeah, the truth is that you've got to talk about it. I mean, you've got to express your feelings without being overly emotional. That this is important to me, and then you've got to look at your schedule. I think that's one of the key things in balancing this introvert extrovert part is looking at your schedule and saying, as the introvert, we just came through December. And oh my goodness, I mean, you want to talk about not having time to recharge, it's December. But now we're in January. And okay, honey, I'm gonna need some time. I'm gonna need some time to just, chill out and just continually talking about because every season's different. In the summertime, I love to hang out with people. That's here in Michigan, summer is golf, it's the lake, it's do with people because we have such a short summer. But that's again, it varies from season to season.
So if point number one is reflect on your values to figure out how the yes and no part of this whole thing works, then number two is clarify your priorities. Let me have you dive into that a little bit and why that matters and what priorities, what the definition is of my priorities versus my values. How are those things different?
Values are your inner desires. Your priorities are how you flesh those out. In other words, my mom has a famous saying, people are going to say what they're going to say, but it's what they do that counts. And I think that's true. Where are we going to spend our time, our energy, and our money? These become our priorities. Those things that we spend our time, our energy, and our money when it's our time to spend. When you're at work, you're at work. You're working. But when you're home on the weekends, when you're on vacation, what are those? How are you going to spend your time? How are you going to spend your energy? And how are you going to spend your money? Helps define your priorities. Long time ago, we committed that even though one of Laura's love languages is gifts, that the gift we're going to give each other is shared experiences away. That it's more important for us to go. Remember when we drove the bug around Lake Michigan and we saw that panther up in Pictured Rocks? And yeah, I mean, that's more important to me than a new pickleball paddle. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, is creating those priorities of what are the actions that we're going to take based on our values.
Well, I think when you talk about your values, and we're talking about the people, the ideas, and the things that are important to you, we can people will be easy. The people that are important to you, as you talk about it, obviously your kids, your relatives, your friends, your people at church, people that you work, you're going to have all these people. But then when you have all these people, then what's the priority? Where are you going to spend your time? Is it going to be with people at work all the time? Because when you say yes to the people at work, you're saying no to your family. Or are the family the priority? Are your kids the priority? Is your marriage relationship the priority? Then the action happens where you make that time, when you have the free time, then the priority is your kids and your spouse. So that's where you spend the time. And maybe, once a quarter you go out with friends from work or your friends from church. But the priority out of all these people that are valued in your life, the people that are the priority are your kids and your spouse. So that's where I need to spend my time, because when I say yes to my family, I'm saying no to my friends and my work, which is okay. Even though they're all good, it's all good.
Here's a perfect example from real life that happened just today. We had told our pastor that we would come and do some volunteer work at church today around the lunch hour. And we've done tons of volunteer work at our church. So he knows us, he trusts us. Well, this morning, my mother, who is 84 and has stage 4 cancer, has gone through radiation and it's in remission. She called and she said, for the first time in 5 months, I feel like going out for lunch. Can we go out for lunch today? Guess what? Guess who we called?
Yeah.
We called Pastor Aaron and said, ain't going to happen. Because that time with my mother, now if she was healthy and we'd been eating lunch every week, no, Mom, we've got volunteering at the church. But you see how those things play, and your priorities are revealed by your actions. So your values are what you internalize, your priorities are how you act, I think.
And I'm reminded of the challenge that could be part of all of this if you grew up in a home where the priorities were very different from what yours should be. For instance, if you grew up in a home where For dad, work was the top priority. That's how he was raised, and there was nothing going to change that. And he was probably bordering on workaholic. And you thought, well, that must be what the top priority is supposed to be. And now you come into a marriage where it's evident that that's not a healthy way to go. I would think that however you were raised, your nurture could present some challenges as you try to get your priorities balanced properly for your marriage.
Well, your family of origin helps shape your priorities. There's no question. And that's what you and your spouse have to take a realistic look at is, I mean, you and Ellen grew up in the same state, and Laura and I, you probably have a lot more in common when you got married than Laura and I, because I grew up in Petoskey, Michigan, small town, northern Michigan, rural. Laura grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, deep South. I mean, literally the church that she grew up in, when the men in the church found out that we were going to get married, my name was no longer Jay LaFoon. It was Damn Yankee. I mean, and to my face, okay, to my face. And so we were so different in how we were brought up. And if you want to bleep that, you can. So that family of origin, that I grew up with a dad who was a minister who was in the military. I mean, he wore his belt out on my backside. That was the way he disciplined. Laura's family, she never got spanked. Ever.
That's not true.
Oh, I didn't think you ever
No,
got.
I grew up in a home where my dad was disabled. So yes, I got spanked early on, but not later.
Oh,
I
was 18
not as
still
a
getting
middle
spanked.
school, high schooler. No. Then I just tormented my dad because he couldn't walk. I'd say, well, you can spank me if you can catch me. I mean, I was just a bad child. But but yeah, we did grow up in very different homes, and what we value, but our values when we got married were very similar. Family is value, and honesty and integrity and hard work. But the way that fleshed out was very different. And so that's why it's very important to be able to communicate about your values, and then what is the priority? What are the priorities for you as a couple? And just because you grew up in a home where this was the priority, that doesn't mean that it's going to be the priority.
Well, and that's the beauty of marriage, isn't it? That, my parents did it their way, and that was their way, and good for them. But we get to decide what's our way. And some of it's going to be right. Some of it's going to be wrong. But at least we get the opportunity to make those choices and together create our priorities. And, the hardest part is saying to your spouse, okay, what are we doing wrong? In your eyes, and then to have ears to hear that kind of a thing.
So if point one was reflect on your values and point two is clarify your priorities. Number three, this one hits hard for when I think back, me, quite a bit younger. Assess your capacity. Be realistic about your time, energy, and resources. You talk about somebody who was saying yes to everything. When it came to my profession, I was saying yes to everything. I was working full-time in television. I was hosting a daily sports talk radio show. On Thursdays, I would host a coach's show at a local restaurant for a college football team. On Fridays, I was calling high school football or basketball games on the radio. Saturdays was the college football or basketball broadcast. Sunday, we'd go to church, and Monday, we would start the whole thing again, and never really took the time to assess the capacity, because I had put as my priority rapidly climbing through this hierarchy of broadcasting. You've got to do all these things if you're going to get to wherever. And I mean, every year I would lose my voice, which was probably considered a blessing by many.
Or a red flag.
Well, that
For
was
you.
a red flag and also a blessing for people who are tired of hearing me talk. But considering your workload and your personal obligations, how easy can it be to say yes to so many things that you're losing track of the relationship? And I was very, very bad at that. I did not know how to say the word no. Did not. If it came, I didn't care if they were paying $50, $100, or no bucks. It was this opportunity. And I thought that was the be all and end all. So take us through the mindset of assessing your capacity.
So we've got a good friend. His name's Bill Crawford, and Bill is a retired minister now. But Bill did not get married until he was 42 years old. It wasn't that he wasn't looking; he just didn't find the right woman until he was 42. And by the time he was 45, Bill had a son and twin daughters. So from age 42 to age 45, he got married, had a son and two daughters. And I vividly remember him saying to me, maybe 5 years later, he said, Jay, I thought when I got married, all I'd have to do is come home from work at 6:30, and everything would be great. I'd play with my family, and we'd have dinner, and it would just be wonderful. He said, what I found was I would come home and I would not have 1 ounce of emotional energy to give to my family. I was completely drained. And I had spent all of my energy, be it physical, emotional, mental energy, on everybody else. And I never reserved enough for the people that I truly love. Mm-hmm. And so that's, it's not assessing your capacity necessarily to work hard, because I think, Bill, you and I are cut of the same cloths. We're type A driven people, and it's very easy to go until you collapse. But it's also that emotional and mental, capacity that you have to analyze it. Okay, am I fully here when I get home from work? Mm-hmm. Am I fully accessible to my wife, or am I just so exhausted all I want to do is sit and think about nothing?
I think that's a very common conundrum for men in the capacity. I think for women, what we end up doing is, especially when we have children, that capacity, we have to monitor our capacity and our time and that of our family and our children. And what ends up happening, at least from what my purview, my seeing it from here, is we have allowed our children to be involved in so many different activities and so many different out of school, whether it's sports or music or drama or whatever. And they all happen at the same time. And so you've got families who are literally gone from their home. They go to work, they go to school, and then there's something that has to happen at night. And sometimes you've got this child and this, and this child and this, and this child. You don't have the capacity to be able to do all of that and sustain a healthy family and marital relationship. And so you really have to, as it'll go into our next and last point, is to set those boundaries. What is the capacity that we have as a family? And with our kids, we were, for one, whatever season it was, for the fall, you have an activity, for the winter, you have an activity, and for the spring, you can have an activity. And the summer, there's no activities. You're not in school. You need to be outside playing, doing stuff. Maybe there's a week of camp here or there. But we set that because that's the capacity we had as parents with 2 children. What can we do? What can we feasibly have in our lives that we can make sure that we don't burn out and just be so exhausted that we're not good for anything?
And I think what happens with the whole idea of the capacity is, generally it doesn't become a problem until a couple's been married 5-10 years. You've got those honeymoon years, those years you're getting used to each other, and then you begin to take each other for granted, and neither one of you has reserved the capacity for the other. And for some reason or another, men, it's wired different. Men are wired different than women, but we both come to the table with nothing left to give. And that's when your priorities are probably not lining up with your values, because when you really look at your values, they should shape your priorities and allow you to have margin in your life in order to really invest in this person that you love. And that, again, the margin comes, as we're talking here at the end, with boundaries and what are reasonable expectations and boundaries that we're going to put on each other, we're going to hold each other accountable to. And so that's why it's important to set them together. I could have easily, because I am a firstborn, Laura's a middle child. Laura's very compliant. by nature.
Sometimes complacent.
She goes with the flow very easily. And early in our marriage, it was just, I'm just directing traffic and she's following along and we're And at some point she just had to say, wait, you're going too fast. You're exhausting me. You're exhausting yourself. Not just physically, but in all these other areas. And we need to stop and evaluate what's going on. That happened for us at year 10, but it was her that said, we've got to stop and evaluate because things are just, we're not doing this thing right. And I think what we've done, and it's been interesting because boundaries change over the years. You think you set the boundaries for the game and the game changes. The game changes when you have kids. The game changes when those kids get older. The game changes when those kids become teenagers. The game really changes when they leave the house. The game changes back again when they come back to the house. That kind of stuff. But
and then all game is off when you have grandkids.
Yeah. Then apparently there are no boundaries when you have grandchildren. But yeah, it's those boundaries. And I'm a sports guy. Laura's a sports girl. You're a sports guy. If we use too many sports analogies, sorry, but you got to play the game inside the boundaries.
Yeah.
I call it out of bounds for a reason. It is illegal to move out of bounds. But that's the joy also of watching amazing football, basketball, baseball plays when they're in bounds. It's amazing what these athletes can do. It's amazing what a golfer can do with a golf ball. And it's amazing what you and your spouse can do when you operate inside your boundaries that you've created yourself, that you feel are fair, that you feel are equitable. And that's the beautiful thing when you walk through this kind of thing together.
I find it interesting as I think about football, basketball, even golf, when you're out of bounds on a football field, usually when you're out of bounds, there's a lot of people on the sideline, somebody can get hurt. There's danger in your out of bounds. On a golf course, out of bounds is usually in some heather that you don't want to step in, or in the water, or again, there's an element of danger involved in the out of bounds. So those boundaries are there to protect and to keep you safe. And the out of bounds is where there could be some lurking,
Well, and we obviously know things like adultery are out of bounds, the way out of bounds. And so, those kind of things are, we know it, even for the times when we're stepping out of bounds, we know it. But it's those boundaries that you fail to set. Like, how much time are we going to spend with the in-laws? We need to make boundaries with the in-laws. How much television are we going to really allow the children to watch? That's a boundary that you need to set. And these might seem like, oh, no, they'll just happen. No, these kind of things don't just happen. If you don't set boundaries with your in-laws, before you know it, you're eating every meal with your mother-in-law, for crying out loud, And so
I know that from experience.
She knows that from experience. So setting those boundaries, it's really freeing for a couple, because it again comes back to the topic that we're talking about. When you set your boundaries, you have the power to say the two most important words in the world, and that's the word yes to stuff that's inside our boundary and no to the stuff that's outside our boundary.
It's going to be helpful for all of you to make sure you check out the podcast notes, both on your device or on the YouTube channel where you're watching, because we will put the outline of today's conversation in there, and the 4 primary points that help you get to a place where you can find your yes and your no. Those last 2 of assessing your capacity and setting clear boundaries, they're really tied so closely together. And I know we live in a culture that is trying to convince you that you've got to have every last second of every single day programmed with something. But I would encourage you, as part of this boundary setting, to set some time aside that's not scheduled, that gives you a chance to just breathe and actually experience life in general, so that you can, what's the phrase is, smell the roses a little bit. There are so many good things happening in so many of our households that we don't even take the time to notice or thank the Lord for, and to count them as blessings, because we're just on to the next thing. We've got maybe those little fleeting moments. I just had lunch with a friend of mine who's wrestling with the whole teenage son and the angst of, well, having a teenage son, and trying to take enough time to capture those little snapshots that, as I told him, you're going to want to remember these 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because they go by so fast. They're just gone. And if we all are distracted or overscheduled and we don't have those boundaries set, we'll miss those both with our kids and with our spouses. So I really appreciate that very good outline on getting to and articulating your yes and no. And again, we'll put all those notes in the podcast notes for you to soak in. Make sure you share the link as well with others in your world so that we can encourage other families.